Hey Hacksters, welcome to Tuesday. It is another Hackster Cafe, my favorite day of the week. And this week we've got Chelsea Klukas, who has been a prior guest like 5 years ago. So this is a bit of a reunion of sorts, inspired by our new contest. Hello, Chelsea. How's it going?
Hello, good. Good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, I feel like with the whole events toning down for a while, and now finally things are kind of opening back up again, we might actually see each other in person again.
That'd be great. Yeah, it's awesome to see people again or meet new people that you've seen on screen for years and see how tall they are and all that stuff.
So we have you as a judge in one of our new contests that's actually in the judging phase right now, which is our Tech Fashion Design Challenge, because you do a ton of cool things with fashion tech, and that's everything from Make Fashion, where you have your own community hub on Hackster, to wearabletutorials.com, to Lumen Couture, which is your own luminous couture brand. So much cool stuff going on, and we're very excited to see the outcome of this contest. But in the meantime, could you tell us a bit about what you do and what your journey has been with these companies?
Yeah, absolutely. I can give you sort of the TLDR history of how all these things come together. So Make Fashion was founded with myself and two other co-founders, Shannon and Maria Hoover, in Canada, in Calgary. Geez, now over 10 years ago, like 12 or 13 years ago at this point. And that was in the very early days of wearable tech, where there wasn't a lot of design and art driven wearables. Like, this was just very early. This was in the era around like the Google Glass, where we were starting to see the concept of these wearables come, but not a lot of creativity and artistry behind them. So we had this idea of what would it look like to put together tech and fashion and arts and storytelling into a fashion show. So we got together a group of fashion designers, artists, programmers, electronics enthusiasts, makers, and just kind of like talked about this idea and kind of came up with some inspiration around it and put together this fashion show. And very small venue. We had it in the art gallery that Shannon and Maria owned, sold out this tiny art gallery, and the photos and videos from this first event, really took off and went viral. And then after that, we were kind of on this rocket ship of being invited to present at different events, getting all sorts of different designers and artists interested in what we were doing. So continue to do that. Over the time, we started to use Make Fashion as sort of a hub for branching out into these other areas, including Make Fashion education, where we were taking it and instructing younger children, education programs. I then broke out and started my own brand, Lumen Couture, coming out of a lot of people after these shows saying like, oh, I want that for myself. Can I buy that? Can I wear that? But a lot of the pieces we were showing on the runway weren't necessarily designed to be worn every day or washed. They were kind of more the show kind of prototype pieces. So that was when I spun out Lumen Couture and focused on garments that were durable, easy to wear multiple times, washable to some degree. You could either take out the electronics or have components that can be washed and worn repeatedly. And from there, also at the same time, within Make Fashion, we also started honing in and modifying the components that actually create the garments, because through producing these shows and through coaching and working with all these different design teams, we really learned how to optimize the components for ways that are easy to use for a variety of skill sets, from beginners who are just wanting to put a few lights in their garments, all the way to things that are more programmable and customizable to a large degree. And so Wearable Tutorials spun out of that, where I've been focusing on very easy to use, entry level, no programming, no soldering required unless you want to do that, as well as Enlighten is another product that has come out that I would say is like sort of the next step, but still very easy to use, as well as the YouTube channel, just kind of showing people how to do different tips and techniques from things that we've learned over time. Also in the pandemic, when things started to shut down, when the events started shutting down, when there was less interest in purchasing or making these garments that you wear out in the world, I was kind of like in my studio figuring out like what to do with myself, because everything was shut down. And I thought, oh, I have these components. I have a demo here. These are some of the components that we've used for our garments and that I was using for other work prior to the pandemic. And I was making masks just to like give to friends. And, back at the start, masks were really hard to come by. So I had all my sewing materials. And I thought, oh, wait, it would be kind of cool to like put two and two together. So I did this YouTube video on my channel on how to actually make the mask yourself with the component that I was already selling on wearable tutorials. That one went viral, so to say, and the mask really took off, got a ton of attention, positive and negative. I got, I've been online for a very long time, but the first time I've had like real backlash just over the mask, which was really surprising. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, really, really interesting. And so that was a big focus, and kind of like the 15 minutes of fame for Lumen Couture over the pandemic.
I'm so sorry that you had that kind of backlash. I'm curious what kinds of comments people were saying.
And I, like I said, I've been online for a long time, and I've, been like a pretty outspoken feminist, and I'm not afraid to tell people where
Ah,
to go. But that wasn't it. It was just about the mask. It was literally just the concept of, and actually have a demo here of the masks. I was just, I wasn't even like advocating making any claims, anything like that. It was like, hey, here's a cool mask that you can make, and then other videos like demonstrating the mask, and just the anti-masker backlash,
ah,
and not just like comments on YouTube, which is fair game, but people following me and like searching the Lumen Couture and make fashion hashtags and posting all this stuff. So
wow.
yeah, very very angry people. So that was a surprise.
Yeah, and it's such a cool project, like, all the different examples that you put on here, but yeah, and you were, using these paper thin flex LED panels, is that right?
Yeah, I grabbed a couple demos here. So yeah, this is a really great product for wearable tech, because it's programmed through
Mm.
an app on your phone, so you can upload any images, any text. It has an equalizer function that uses the microphone on your phone. There's not a built-in mic, so it can
Ah,
actually respond in real time. That was that kind of bar graph to the sound and the music. So a lot of great applications. Initially, before the mask project, I was using these. I had a belt, so this was in the belt that you could wear, and then
mm.
with the smaller one, I had like sort of like a choker product, and I was looking at different ways to integrate them into the garments and the clothing, which I have a few pieces that kind of integrate these in different ways. You can kind of put them wherever you want, and they're so lightweight. The battery's really light as well. Yeah, you pulled that up. And so I do offer these on wearable tutorials for people to make their own outfits out of them. It's really cool to see. People will send me images, or on Etsy you can do photo reviews of some of the really interesting projects that people have
Ah!
been doing with these panels.
That is so cool, and I at first was just showing the little small one here, but you've got them in multiple sizes, small ones that are just white, large ones that are multicolor, obviously the ones for the mask and the belt here, and then also these small multi-segmented ones.
Yeah, they're super fun. They're yeah, it's been to some degree a game changer for some of the things that you can do with wearable tech, because it just makes it super easy. Again, also for the kind of starter entry level wearable technology, you don't need to do a lot of programming or like deep understanding to be able to make something cool. And then hopefully that gets people interested in doing more advanced projects, and taking the pieces further and further, like we've been doing with McFashion over the years.
Yeah, and so these LED panels really address one of the key things with building electronics into garments, like you were talking about. You've got washability, the ability to wear multiple times, but also flexibility and also weight. Like you were saying, the batteries are really light. Are these? How else do you address these types of challenges? And are there other issues with building specifically wearable tech that you deal with, like waterproofness or things like that? And how do you address them?
Yeah, I mean, I think safety is always the first thing. So
Oh,
ensuring that you're using the right type of batteries, that the batteries are placed, certain handling of certain type of batteries on these ones. These are encased in a resin, so they're very secure and can't be punctured, because that's an issue, and particularly problematic when you have them on your body. Fortunately, within Make Fashion, we've had probably close to 100 shows, hundreds of garments. We have not had a single safety issue, but that's
wow.
you don't want there to be a first time, right? Because on the body, that's something that you don't want to happen. So safety is always first, making sure that the batteries are correctly handled. In some of my videos, I talk about battery safety. Also, components can heat up if they're getting too much charge, or if you're overloading the batteries. So that's something that's super important to consider. And to some degree, the components I offer make that foolproof, but not entirely tamper-proof. You can certainly work your way around to make something unsafe. People will sometimes email me and say, "Oh, can I hack this and change the battery or do this. I'm like, please don't. You might know what you're doing, but I just please don't do that unless you're really, really sure. So safety is a big one. Yeah, the durability, certainly. I mean, I kind of joke that every time we have a fashion show, something goes wrong. There's just so many failure points. Between each LED light, when it's bending and flexing, it's not necessarily, if it's a product that's not necessarily designed for that. The flexibility and the durability of the components themselves. Often, by the time you have the garment on and something stops working, there's a lot of backtracking and having to reverse engineer like where that specific fault happened. Actually, also one of the products that I have on my website is, I don't know how well you can see this, but LEDs. One issue we have with these LED strips, which the strips are great because they're flexible, but because they're flexible, the solder points can break. So what we were starting to do at Make Fashion was just put the heat shrink right over the LED light, just to make sure that this failure point doesn't break. So on wearable tutorials, I actually have these in a few different configurations that have the heat shrink already there, just to kind of save you a step of having to do that yourself. So yeah, the durability and then the washability is the other one. In the early days of Make Fashion, we were not really expecting to have as much interest in as many shows as we did, so we were not necessarily designing these garments for hundreds of uses and wearings. And we quickly realized by taking some of these garments out of the garment bag that like this has been worn by a lot of people and it's never been washed because we don't know how to wash it. So that's where we develop different techniques as far as like how to wash them and keep them clean and sanitary, especially for the ready to wear, which you expect to be washing, much more frequently than a runway piece.
For sure. So, when it comes to the durability and running these events, I've seen people at cosplay conventions. There's sometimes someone there who is like a cosplay medic, which I think is a really cool idea. When I go to things with my own robots, I always have like a little repair kit that I bring along, and I'm wondering what's in your repair kit that you would bring to an event.
Double-sided tape, always important. Just kind of does magic. You actually get the toupee tape is the strongest double-sided tape for fashion. Also good if you're ever at a wedding. That'll save the day. There's always something that goes wrong with a garment. Soldering stuff. I have a little portable one that we'll bring for our events. Extra batteries, battery charges. Often like the battery is the failure point as well. I have a small battery, which is great because it's lightweight, but you're limited by the charge. So often you'll run into a situation where all the batteries run out and you have to replace that. Standard needle and thread, extra wires, extra components, extra controllers. Also depends on what types of garments you have, but I always try to make sure that we have a lot of backups because it's very frustrating when you're minutes about to walk on the runway and then all of a sudden you power out or you start glitching or something like that.
Yeah. When you say you have a portable iron, do you use a butane one or do you have one that runs off a battery, or what's your favorite portable soldering iron?
Yeah, I forget the brand of it, but it's tiny. It's like the size of a pen, and yeah, it's just a USB, so you can just plug it into any USB outlet. So
Is it possibly the TS80 or TS100 from Miniwave?
very similar to that. Yeah, not that exact brand, but yeah, maybe it's it. Yeah. Oh yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, mine looks a little different. It must be an older model. Yep, that's the one.
I love these things so much. I've been wanting to get the one that runs off a USB-C. There's also the Pine Sil, which is like an open source version, which is like even cheaper, I think, but uses the same
Yeah.
chips.
Well, I used to have the gun. Do you remember the gun? Because I didn't have my own, and I like before I really knew what I was doing, and I think I I found it in like my parents' house or something, and it used to be this like big scary thing, and it was like, oh, the technology has come so far.
Yeah. So tell us about how you got into this line of work. Tell us a little bit more about your origin story.
So I went to art school. I've always been interested in technology and sciences and maths, but I decided to go into art school because that was my passion. I think to some of my family was not impressed that I could have gone into any profession. I chose to go into art school, but that was what I wanted to do, and I'm glad I did it. So studied fine art, then eventually started studying graphic design. When I did realize that like I did need to eventually make a living, and I wanted to make a living at least adjacent to what I studied versus go into something completely different because it's very difficult to make a living as a fine artist. So then very quickly found myself working in tech. Kind of just jumped into various roles and started doing product design, UX design. which was a great way to merge those interests. So I was able to kind of come full circle and find a way to use my arts background as well as some of the interests I had when I was younger, and that kind of continued through. And I've just always enjoyed making things, as many creative people do, just building and making and trying different mediums. And then the wearable technology really just came through Make Fashion. When we had these ideas, it was something that was new to everyone. And initially I wasn't actually creating, I was more facilitating and helping with the branding and the events and the shows. And after doing a few shows and participating in them, I realized that I wanted to start kind of doing it myself and trying out new things. So that was when I started actually showing, in addition to producing the events and co-running Make Fashion, which was really really satisfying. And actually the first piece that I created was actually named Lumen Couture, sort of a precursor to the brand Lumen Couture, which was a projection matched dress.
Ooh,
I was
yeah.
projection mapping, and worked through how to actually project onto a garment, which actually ended up being through a hat. So we had a couple variations of this, my partner and I, where the projector is actually in the hat, kind of shining back down onto the body, and we had variations that actually yeah, that's it there. That actually maps so that when the model moves her head, it's actually, I don't know if you can see, there's that brooch on the shoulder, but that's actually how the camera is tracking the body and mapping it. So
Ah.
move her head, and the projection would remain stable. And then through the panels, actually, I was able to achieve to some degree the same effect, but directly within the garment in sort of a different way. But I've always been interested in that idea of like, what if you could have any image on a garment, not just the LEDs, but be able to show anything there. Also, from a perspective of sustainability, and in a world of fast fashion where people will buy a new T-shirt or buy a new design, as the trends change, or as their interests change, the idea of having a garment that you could have for a long time and have different designs and different elements on it is something that's been really appealing to me.
Yes, it's such a cool dress. So you also work with Oculus, and I'm curious if you are working on or seeing, yeah, any overlaps between VR and fashion.
I mean, the VR, my career is just another great way to continue my arts and desire to make things and create with tech and with new innovative technology. Is certainly I don't work directly in the hardware space, but certainly the challenges of like a wearable of the headset are very similar. Actually, very very similar to what I did with the projection hat, where you're trying to put electronics in a way that's ergonomic and comfortable, even more so than a runway piece, something that you want to put on and off. So although I don't directly work on the hardware, I'm adjacent to it, and get to kind of like hear how people are solving those problems. And then I think, as far as the wearable, when you look at sort of the embodied self and avatars and sort of avatar fashion, or the ability that you can go into a virtual reality space or a metaverse space, so to say, and represent yourself in any way, and have this sort of similar to the outfit, have this constant changing and evolving way that you
Mm.
look, is something that's really interesting to me. Not specifically just within VR, but with any of these embodied experiences that VR is certainly supporting.
Are there any pop culture examples and references, like speaking of like video games and avatars and stuff, that you would like to see become reality?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, one of the cool things about this is, like, some of these things you see in sci-fi or in video games. It's like, oh, I could make that, uh,
Mhm.
which is kind of, yeah. I mean, I think, like, anything that has, like, hovering, or the ability to fly through your wearables. That's something that would be cool. Like, the jetpack, or like the sheep jetpack alternative is something that is, I think, we're still like pretty far out from, but would be super cool to be able to like zip around and have it be sort of embedded in your wearable. Would be something that I'd like to see. We did actually have a dress that had drones that lifted up the skirt as part of Make Fashion from the Little Dada design group, but
Ooh.
lift you up is something that I think would be super cool.
Yeah, you have a speaking of more exciting new technical stuff, you've got this video out about drones, lasers, and projectors in futuristic fashion, which I think there's just so much cool stuff, and maybe this will include some of
Yeah.
those drones there.
Yeah, this is a just kind of snippets of some of the make fashion pieces that we've shown over time. So yeah, it showcases. Yeah, there you go, exactly. Showcases some of the work, including the drone dress. I think in a minute here you'll see it on the runway. There you go. Yeah,
Yes, that's so cool.
yeah, super super cool. And you know the garment itself is great and has the light. So that was really a really cool one to see. And you know the great thing about these fashion shows that we've been producing is that you know they're visually interesting. There's something for everyone. You don't have to be you know super knowledgeable about fashion. You don't really need to be super knowledgeable about the technology. It's just sometimes fun and hopefully inspiring for people to create or kind of push the boundaries of how we think about fashion and wearable technology. And yeah, there's the projection dress where you can see it's projecting onto her.
But yes, you know, I do think that there's plenty of cool stuff going on with look at the lasers with LEDs in fashion, and at the same time, that does seem to be like the standard thing that people reach for, and it's really exciting to me personally to be seeing these other technologies be involved in it, including these sort of variably translucent panels that are so cool.
Yeah, those are mind blowing. That's Irina Kajahar's work, and the panels go from opaque to translucent. So the lasers are contained, and then the lasers come out, which is super cool. I mean the when we do our shows, often the LEDs are the more you know visually you know interesting pieces, but there have been a lot of make fashion pieces that do not involve LEDs and use different sensors. So you know you can you know sense your heart rate and have a garment that does certain things based on that. We've have garments that have you know heating and cooling properties based on your body temperature,
Ooh.
which are also very interesting. So in the shows, if we you know we don't always have those like visually light up, which you know kind of you know stand out from a distance. But I think some of the like really interesting and compelling pieces are ones that are often more subtle or could even blend in more to your everyday outfits.
Yeah, there's so much of a contrast between sort of the fashion side and the what you would sort of daily wear. Um, you mentioned some new technologies. Are there any other new developments in tech that you're really excited about using in fashion? So other things that are just coming out in the space. For example, I've seen these LED noodles that I think are really cool and would be really interesting. Anything else that you're interested in seeing how it develops?
Yeah, I mean, I am interested in just you know as hardware evolves. I don't know if it's necessarily anything new, although you know if there's something new that I haven't seen before, it's always exciting. But I think just you know the technology getting better, smaller, you know, longer battery time, less expensive. I think that the you know price is often a barrier to entry for people creating these garments. LEDs are relatively low cost, but once you start to you know build a larger garment, it becomes more expensive. So you know, I think for you know what the way I'm thinking about you know more people entering into this as a way to create. It's also we've seen through our education. It's a great way to engage, you know, young girls or groups of people who wouldn't necessarily be naturally introduced to electronics or programming or robotics. Find a path to this through fashion, which is something that they may already be interested in or familiar with. Is you know, and as the price goes down and as these things become more accessible, it just becomes easier and easier for a broader group of people to engage with this and do interesting things. So I think the LEDs are kind of the first step of that, but I'd love to see more of these, you know, different components and boards and tools become, you know, better and more accessible for everyone.
Do you see it going the other way as well, where people who are maybe more experienced with electronics but might not be really into fashion, are you seeing that your work is sort of introducing those people to the joys of fashion?
I hope so. I would love to see that to see that happen. I mean, certainly with Make Fashion, we you know we get these groups together where you know maybe one person will propose an idea, but we'll have people who say like, hey, I don't necessarily have an idea, but I want to be a part of this and I want to be a part of a team. So through that, we have seen you know this mingling of people who would maybe never think about fashion learning about you know the craft and how garments are made as well as vice versa. I mean, when I started Lumen Couture, I initially started, you know, targeting towards women because often this type of fashion is female coded. But with the mask, I actually had a lot of men interested in asking me for male gender garments or more unisex garments. So it
Hmm.
does seem that there's an interest there. So I think that that's something that potentially could be really really interesting, and I have been thinking about doing more tutorials and more products that are geared towards a broader audience of garments over just the dresses and the traditional sort of runway attire.
Absolutely. I feel like, it bears mentioning that a lot of, I think, the overlap there comes from things like festivals and Burning Man, where, everyone just wants to have cool LED stuff. But also, these kinds of things can be incredibly punishing environments, even more than like a runway or whatever. And it's really interesting to see how people deal with that.
Yeah, I actually used to do rentals with Lumen Couture. That was a part of the business, but I started saying like no Burning Man rentals. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
like everyone wants to rent something from Burning Man, but it just like it doesn't come back. So that's actually part of why I pivoted over to the DIY. It's like I'm not gonna necessarily let you rent this and at the rental price point, which is different than purchasing the garment, but you can use these components to make your own, and then you can decide how durable, or if it's a one-time wear or that type of thing.
Yeah, and I think that this kind of overlaps with your sort of sustainability, and if you're building something for yourself, you can find something really cool and then upgrade it with tech, which not only is like a really cool thing to do for events, but also like does this cool sustainability angle where something's not getting thrown in the trash, not getting passed over. You can like upcycle your old stuff and make it cooler again. Uh, is there other Are there other projects where you've brought in this sort of, like, upcycling aspect? This is so
Yeah,
cool,
and
by the way. I love this.
yeah. I've done this a few times where I've just found things at a thrift store, like this example, and it has a certain, like this one in particular had this sort of like semi transparent mesh in it, and once you start doing this, you kind of see it everywhere, like, oh, this would look good with LEDs. So
Mm.
just did this tutorial to demonstrate how you could use the kits to upcycle something and to you know get in people's minds that you don't necessarily need to build something from scratch. You can buy something at a thrift store, take something that's already in your wardrobe and turn it into something new, and turn it into something that's quite exciting and fantastical, and gets attention at a festival or whatever kind of costume you want to use it for.
Yeah, that definitely brings down the intimidation factor, I think,
Yeah,
for
and
people.
going back to, you don't need to know how to design a pattern, or you don't need to know how to sew. In this example, this dress didn't really fit me properly, and I kind of talk about like you just take it in on the sides. It's not really that hard. You can kind of do this yourself. And I talk about how you don't even need to have a sewing machine. You can just do hand stitching. So really trying to make these projects and these ideas accessible to people who might not think that they're able to do it. I mean, certainly when we started Make Fashion and I saw the pieces that other people were doing, I thought, oh, I could never do that. Like,
Mm.
I don't know how to, I did sewing as a child, and like knew my way around a sewing machine, but certainly not to the degree of some of these other designers. But my own journey of discovery that I can do this. Sometimes you just need to watch a couple YouTubes, or ask a few people, or the great thing about the Make Fashion community is we had people who even physically in a room would come over and help you understand how to do these different things. So through the tutorials, extending that idea of the community helps each other out, and shares different things, which I find generally in the like Blinky LED or the fashion tech online community, there's just a ton of idea sharing, and this real openness to sharing different techniques or tools to help people just create and do more bigger, better projects over time.
Absolutely. And here's a question. So I don't see you using a lot of conductive thread. Are there reasons that you prefer the materials that you use in particular? I know that I've had some issues with conductive thread in the past, and you also seem to prefer like soldering and heat shrink and stuff. Is that a durability thing? Is it a connectivity thing?
It's a good question. I do have a few tutorials on the conductive thread. I don't think they're video. I think they might just be text tutorials. I do find, yeah, the connectivity of the thread I find is a little tricky. I find I never get the degree of power that I'd like to. The durability is also an issue. The great thing about conductive thread is it is extremely invisible. But I have found the difference between the thread and something like this is pretty incremental. Like I do find that I'm able to work with these materials and hide it almost to the same. There's a little bit of weight there, but almost to the same degree of conductive thread. So I've moved away from using conductive thread in a lot of my projects, although I know a lot of designers and makers really enjoy using it. It's kind of their primary tool that they're using to create their garments. But it is a super cool thing to be able to, and if you can kind of like do the hack and get it in your sewing machine, you can kind of create these really beautiful and interesting pieces.
Love it. And yeah, so we talked for a moment about sensors. You mentioned heart rate sensors. Obviously, there's like motion sensitive things, which you were even doing with like a camera on the projector dress, which I think is really interesting. I'm curious about what some of the more surprising sensors and interactions you've seen with garments are, or ones that you would love to use yourself or see used that you don't usually see out there.
I think the biometric sensors are really interesting. We've had some really interesting make fashion pieces that use that as a part of the storytelling. Maria is one of the make fashion co-founders. She has a garment that is kind of is designed around awareness around anxiety, and it uses the biometric
Mm.
sensors to detect when someone is anxious. So using different sensors that are on the body, and then the garment responds in different ways to signal to other people that someone is anxious, and also in ways to calm down the wearer. I think those types of applications are really interesting, not just for the the runway and the conceptual work, but also as far as practical everyday uses. I don't know if the execution would exactly be a dress that lights up when you're feeling anxious, but some other factor. I mean, to a large degree, we do see this today in wearables, like the wrist wearables, where it'll detect certain biometrics and tell you certain things, or tell you things about yourself, which I think is great. I mean, I am always interested in taking it beyond the standard wrist wearable, but that's obviously a very accessible way
Mm.
to have those types of sensors. But as far as the fashion, I think it would be interesting to have ways that are more integrated into your outfits and into your garments. I think another example of taking something that is a more conventional wearable, like the headphones, is that I did a
Mm.
video on it. There was a group that was doing earrings that did a lot of the same things that like a headphone would, but had extra capability. So those concepts where it's pushing something that is conventional and taking it in a different way that's a little bit more design forward or fashion forward are really interesting to me. I wonder if it's there. I think it's yeah, it's called like hearables.
Ooh. I'll just give it a
Oh
second,
yeah,
see
there
if
it
I
is
see.
there.
Oh, there
Yeah.
we go.
Yeah, the smart earrings, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
really
earrings are such a I actually got my ears pierced a few years ago as a grown-up because I wanted to have more, like, ports to put stuff in.
I like
Uh,
that. I like that thinking of your earrings as ports. Yeah, so this is showing like it has a lot of the same capabilities as the Alexa, these earrings, which actually this is a make fashion one, but then the actual earrings will be shown in a minute there. So yeah, taking again, and I think it is very similar to technology that starts out as big and clunky, making it something that's elegant and really integrated into our everyday lives, as well as integrated into like social norms and fashion norms that are familiar to us. On the other side of that, I have seen an evolution of those norms as far as what's acceptable. I mean, I think if you go to
mm,
the Google Glass example, when that came out, that was not largely socially acceptable, and people made comments, and it was just not really seen as something that was seamless or integrated or cool, so to say. But I have seen where things that over time, things that were previously not socially acceptable just become more normal and more accepted. I mean, even earbuds, like there was a time when walking around with earphones was like a little bit weird, right? And now we see it all the time. It's completely acceptable. Similar to like the wrist wearables, where at first I think having a piece of technology like that instead of a bracelet or a conventional watch was something that was different and maybe not considered fashionable, but we've certainly seen that that's become much more accepted as those technologies merge to more traditional, historically fashionable forms, also society becomes more accepting of those new forms, which I think we've also seen, with VR and hopefully with AR, where wearing these things or having these things on in public becomes more familiar, which also enables us to do more different things with those technologies.
Yeah, and, so one thing that you post about a lot is your bunnies, and I'm curious, obviously there's gonna be other safety concerns as well, but it makes me think about, the acceptability of there's all these dog collars and stuff that you're seeing around in public nowadays with, like, fiber optics, with, like, LEDs, light piped around through the collar. I'm curious if you ever thought about making a wearable for your bunnies, and if so, what it would be.
We have tried to have the rabbits model the pieces. They're not
Oh!
super keen on it. Yeah, I did like the little choker and tried to like just put it as like a little thingy on the bunny. Yeah, I think the dog collars are super cool. Like I think that's also just a great practical application of the LED, so you can see your dog from a distance. So it might be interesting to see where that goes if we take some of these different sensors. Also, like the trackers on your pets, you can sort of have this wearable that can track your pets and tell you where they
Mhm.
are, or the cameras. It's always interesting to see those like day in the life of a dog cameras. So I think there's an opportunity there for especially pets that are running around outside, not my rabbits who live a life of luxury indoors, but just to see some of those. Yeah, they actually got to go outside this summer, and they for the first, well, he was
Such
rescued from
amazing.
outside, so I don't know if it was the first time, but I think it would be interesting. I mean, pets are all different. Some pets don't like wearing things, but it's also certainly become more acceptable to dress up your pets in little outfits and stuff. So I think there could be something there. Maybe someday the bunnies will be on the runway, but they're kind of homebodies.
Well, I think I speak for everyone when I say that a win for bunny fashion is a win for all of us. Absolutely. Cool. So, speaking of sort of, bringing your daily life into, what you do with tech fashion, I'm curious about how you manage to, balance all the stuff that you're doing with Make Fashion, with Lumen Couture, with wearabletutorials.com. Like, you're doing so much, and you also have a day job. What helps you manage that? How do you do the balance there?
For me, I
Ooh.
find that all of those things are energizing to me, so
Mm.
that's what makes them easy to do. And and also the nice thing about these things being on the side is if there's ever a moment where they're not energizing, I can just not do them. I don't have
Mm.
that luxury with my day job, but luckily, there's if it's with any career, if there's like moments where you're not doing what you love doing, there's opportunities to kind of like shift your work and shift your role. So I find that in work and in life, if something's not energizing me, then I like to evaluate that and understand why, and see if there's a way that I can get back to it being energizing, or not do it, or sort of shift the nature of how I do it. I mean, to some degree with Lumen Couture, I really enjoy the making and the creating of the garments and of the ideas. When the masks really took off and I was doing a lot of fulfillment and customer service, that part was not energizing to me because it's tedious and repetitive and just not necessarily the part of the business that I'm excited
Right.
about. So with that, I was able to outsource that and get a third party fulfillment. And there's some loss of
Mm.
profits that go into outsourcing that, but for me, that was what I needed to do to get back to being excited about doing the part that I'm excited to do. So at the end of the workday, I'm generally, I mean, we all have good days and bad days, but at the end of the day, I'm generally feeling energized by the work, and then I feel energized to go and do something else. Just I think it's just part of my nature that I want to be creating and doing. So I find all of those things energize me versus wear me out, which makes it possible. And I think that's just something that when I coach people and talk to them about their careers and their things, like to really scrutinize how these things make you feel and make sure that you're doing them for the right reasons. Obviously, we all need to make money. We all need to find a
Mhm.
job. And if you can, as much as possible, move that work closer and closer to things that energize and inspire you. I think that's just how you're going to feel good at the end of the day, and make it be not just about like the work and the output of it, but also of the process and the creation that comes with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love about that is that I'm sure it's someone else's dream job to like be a person who builds tech fashion stuff for you. I feel like when I was younger, that would have been a really fun job for me personally as well. If you don't mind my asking, how do you organize that? Do you work through a service? Do you go personally to like Craigslist or something, or look for someone to hire? Do you?
So for the fulfillment, there's quite a few variations of this. I use one that's called Fulfill Right, but I researched there's quite a few that they plug into your Shopify, they plug into your Etsy, and they just manage the fulfillment. You ship them inventory,
Ah,
you label it for them, and then they do that all for you. So that's great. That's now entirely hands off for me. When I had the masks, I have some photos of it. Because I was really overwhelmed by the amount of interest and orders, and I was like, you know, assembling them myself, and my boyfriend was like full time like boxing, and we had all these
mm,
boxes like I'm going to the post office, and we got really behind. So that was definitely like it was kind of an exciting moment because it was this physical manifestation of like, oh, this thing is happening, and like I have a business, and like I'm fulfilling these orders. But then after you've been doing that for 3 weeks, it gets a little bit old. Um,
mm.
so that's how I've outsourced that. And also the great thing is it ships really quickly because that's what they do. As far as customer support, I'm actually back to doing my own customer support just because the person I had previously just just got a new role, a new full-time role, so wasn't able to do it anymore. But that was just more conventional, just posting, looking around, referrals for people who do that type of thing. And I mean, the great thing about remote work is that a lot of people are now set up and are doing these remote jobs and are comfortable doing a job that might be 5 hours a week on top of other things that they're doing. So that's certainly made sourcing of these things much easier and helps me get back to doing the part of the business that I'm really excited about doing.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Uh, quick procedural note. Do you have a hard stop at noon? Are you okay to go over a
No,
couple
I'm good.
minutes?
I can go over, yeah.
Okay, cool. I got a couple more questions then. Um, so let's see. You have besides so Make Fashion does so many different things. You've got your runway events, you've got kits and things, but also and you do speaking and things as well, but you've also got this Make Fashion EDU program. Could you tell us a little bit about this?
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is one area that I'm less involved and less hands-on in. This is
Mm.
a branch out of Make Fashion. And I believe that it has picked up again this year after the pandemic when people are getting together in person. But it's great because it takes to some degree takes the principles and how we run Make Fashion of getting people together, helping them take their ideas and bring them to life through different tools and components, and educating on how to use them, and then doing a runway show, but does it with students. So the students have an idea. Through the program they learn what is and what isn't possible. They're able to actually create their own garments, and then at the end they do their own runway show, and the parents get to come and see. And some of the output of what the students do is really amazing, just really creative, really great application of the tools and materials. And then ideally it gets students, as I mentioned earlier, gets students interested in making and building and robotics and programming in a really fun way that it's educational, but it's something that's fun and hopefully fulfilling for them as students.
Awesome. And what microcontrollers do you tend to use? I'm curious about both like Make Fashion EDU, which is obviously, maybe more beginner friendly ones, and like when you're working with your ready to wear product, obviously you're also using some sort of phone app controlled things and maybe not a lot of programming and maybe things that come sort of like with batteries on them like string lights and stuff. But yeah, tell us about your microcontroller choices.
Over time it's evolved. I mean, there's Arduino, there's Raspberry Pi are kind of the typical ones. Enlighten has some customized software for that's really been optimized for a lot of the garments that we were producing through Make Fashion. So that's what a lot of our designers are using. I believe that's also being used in some of the Make Fashion education programs as well. The ones that I sell are just like very simple controllers. Like these are actually quite standard for LED strips. So because they're standard and mass produced, they're also very affordable, which is great. So for mine, they're just these very simple things, and they have this little controller that you can change the color and lights and various set patterns with, but also the lights themselves are compatible with a variety of different microcontrollers.
Mm.
we've often, partnered with seed studios to use a lot of their products. A lot of their controllers are interesting and really great for wearables. So it often really depends on the project, the skill level of the designer, the team that's building it, and just what you want to get out of the controller or the piece itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Another question, in terms of tools also, I've seen a lot of designers using this Clo 3D. I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but like a sort of online design tool for building garments and shapes. Do you use that? Do you use other digital tools for designing?
I tend to be pretty old school. I just kind of draw and sketch on my iPad now, which I guess is the high tech version of it. But
Nice.
I've seen the tools. I haven't actually used them myself, but they're super interesting for designing clothes and designing patterns. I think we're seeing just the evolution of these tools that make things that were traditionally something you would have to study for, or like have an intimate knowledge of to be successful, and becoming easier and easier. I think we'll see this with generative AI. I mean, that's kind of the hot topic right now.
Right.
I don't know if I'm necessarily bought into AI designing all of our clothes for us, but certainly being able to take an idea and help with the execution and the implementation of that idea is very powerful. And I see that as an evolution of the tools we've already had, even with the electronics, where previously you'd have to hand solder, like program it yourself, having these more like, easy solutions for it. So I think that Gen AI will also help us with fashion, potentially also with the made to measure. I mean, I've also in my tech career, I've worked in the space of fit and sizing for fashion, and the challenges with that, and just the way that the garments are produced, and the ability to order a garment or find a garment that fits you properly is very challenging, especially with e-commerce. So I think that
Mm.
we'll start to see these tools. I know I've kind of taken a pivot off of your original question into a
No,
different
no, no.
direction.
That's
I
real.
think we'll start to see these tools make that easier and easier, and I'm hoping that within fashion starts to help us solve these problems that have been really, really tricky to solve over decades.
Absolutely, and, I have a housemate who was working at Stitch Fix for a while, and, he over and over again, it was clear that, their huge selling point was just this algorithm that they had developed from having thousands and thousands of people reporting back on how different stuff fit, that they could actually develop kind of a universal sizing model, which, would be able to say, "If this thing fits you from this company, then maybe this other thing will from that," which especially, of course, as you know, in, like, women's clothing is just, like, this horribly Byzantine situation where it's almost intentionally obscure.
Every body's different, right? Like you can have the same, and I've seen, work that's been done around 3D scanning where that's an attempt to be able to like map out your body and be able to fit clothes on it. The challenge with that is that our body is composed of different parts, right? Like a body that has, more fat or more muscle garments are going to fit differently on it, or cut differently or drape differently. So it's really a big challenge to solve. I think that the first step is just the shape and the form, but you could take two people with the same form with different body compositions, and the clothes are going to fit and look very differently. So the ability to custom tailor to your own body and potentially evolve that, because our bodies change and evolve over time, even over
Mm.
weeks and months if you have certain hormonal fluctuations. So it's a really interesting challenge to solve that we really haven't fully solved yet, but I'd be excited to see if we can with some of these new tools, and potentially with AI.
Absolutely. So, my final question relates to this challenge that we're doing right now, and you're currently in the judging stage. We're very excited to announce the winners. So, I'm curious, what are your favorite things to see in the designs that people submit? Things like, creative design, novel use of technology, solid execution, and I'm curious what kinds of aspects you personally value a lot when you're going through and looking at these projects.
I love to see new ideas. I think with these, I think almost even with new, like people coming in new to tech fashion and this space, almost not being biased by what is and isn't possible can generate new ideas. So I like seeing some of these ideas where it's like, oh, I'm not really sure if that's possible, but I've never seen that before, and I think we could make it possible. Maybe not exactly as described or designed, but like an iteration of that helps us get to the ultimate idea. So I always love seeing those new ideas that push the boundaries versus something that's been done before, sort of, you know, framed in a different way or a slightly different application. So I think particularly with contests or with some of the education programs, we see a lot of those new ideas. So anytime I see something that I haven't thought of before or haven't seen before, that's really, really exciting. Also, again, going back to ways that the technology is integrated in a really interesting way. I mean, I think there's kind of two ways that can go, either putting the technology at the forefront and really celebrating that technology in some way. You know, for example, like solar panels, sort of having those be exposed as part of the garment is interesting. And I think the opposite of that, where the technology is really hidden and invisible, is also interesting, or some combination thereof. But when the actual pieces and components are used as part of the design in some way, I think that's also very interesting and something that I often look for in the pieces or the ideas that I gravitate towards.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much with us today. This has been such a pleasure. I can't believe it's been 5 years since we talked last.
I know it feels like yesterday.
Yeah, so just to run back through places that people can find you and follow your awesome work, we've got, obviously the Tech Fashion Challenge, but we've got Make Fashion on Hackster. You've got your personal Instagram, Lumen Couture, Make Fashion. I'm just gonna run through these really fast. You're on Twitter as well. We'll put all these links in the description. Lumen Couture and Make Fashion on there. We've got Lumen Couture on YouTube. As well as, of course, your regular websites for each of these, as well as wearabletutorials.com. And then, I already showed the Make Fashion Hub on Hackster, so I'm excited to see how these results come out. And thank you so much
You
for
got it
joining us.
all. Yeah, that's. I mean, I have made a commitment to get back on YouTube. I haven't posted recently, but I am going to start posting again. Kind of now that things are kind of happening in the community again, getting inspired to do that again. Kind of back to the point of like, if I don't feel like doing something, kind of wait until the motivation comes. So definitely feeling like I want to start sharing there again. I have some new products that are coming down the pipe for wearable tutorials. So follow there. A few new pieces just based on the feedback and frequently asked questions around the existing products. So stay tuned on there and wearable tutorials and all the different channels. We have some fashion shows coming up again, so stay tuned on those channels to see some of the footage and some of the new pieces that myself and other designers created during the pandemic and have been sitting in the back of a closet. We're going to start to have those see the light of day, which I'm super excited for. So stay tuned on all of those channels, whichever one is your preference, to keep updated on all that.
Yeah, wearable tech tutorials again, and the Lumen Couture YouTube. Be sure to go subscribe to them. Also, of course, subscribe to us if you like this kind of thing. Come back and check out more Hackster Cafe episodes. Most Tuesdays at 7 a.m. Pacific. Sometimes slightly different times, but we have amazing people like Chelsea joining us. Thank you all for watching, and thanks again, Chelsea. Hack on!
Yeah, so good to see you, and thanks for having me. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, cheers.